at the Pascagoula Library. Miss Susan, also at the Pascagoula Library. Mr. Brian works at the St. Martin Library. And of course you all know Miss Cheryl, I believe, from right here at Gaucher. I'm going to start out the first story, and it's got some sound effects that I need y'all to help out with. Now, all these guys on the front row, I think you can come up with the sound effects on your own. Give me a rusty, squeaking gate to a graveyard. Good. Can everybody do that?
Squeak.
Okay. Then we need a dark night with the wind whistling through the trees. We're going to make the trees. Can everybody do that? Arms up in the air like the branches on a tree. And then we need dry brown leaves that are falling out of the tree, and they're rustling along the path. Okay, so when it comes to those parts in the story, if you can all remember those sound effects, you can join in. There was once a very ordinary man named John. John had a wife named Mary, and she was also pretty ordinary. They had two kids, Jim and Jeannie, who, if the truth were to be told, were also quite ordinary. Now, the only thing about this family that was not ordinary was the fact that they lived right next door to the graveyard. Now, every day, John used to take a shortcut to and from work through the graveyard. Now, he could have gone around and not gone through that graveyard, but it would have taken him an extra 20 minutes to get to work. So, ordinarily, he just cut right through the graveyard. And ordinarily, this was not a problem until one time. It was late October. And do you know what happens in late October?
No. Yes. Possibly.
What?
Halloween.
Halloween. And have you ever noticed how at Halloween it gets really dark really early?
No.
Well, that is not your imagination. That's because about a week before Halloween, they go and they turn the clocks back a whole hour. So all of a sudden, it's really dark a whole lot earlier. Well, that's what happened this time. They had just turned back the clocks, and it was 3 days before Halloween. John left work at the usual time, 5:30, and started his walk home through the graveyard. He got to the graveyard gate, and he opened it up. And he stepped inside. And as he walked down the path, the wind whistled through the trees. And the leaves skittered along the path. And from somewhere in that graveyard, a voice called out, "Turn me over! Turn me over!" What? John jumped. He ran as fast as he could till he got home. He was scared. And when he got to his house, he told his wife, Mary, and his kids, Jim and Jeannie, what he had heard in the graveyard. And his wife said, "Dear, there's nothing in the graveyard." And his kids said, "Dad, there's like nothing in the graveyard, okay?" Well, John got to thinking, maybe they're right. So the next night, he decided he'd go ahead and give it a try going through the graveyard again. There was nothing there, he knew. So he started his walk home from work at 5:30. He got to the graveyard and he opened the gate. And he stepped inside and he started walking down the path through the graveyard. And as he did, the wind whistled through the trees. And the leaves skittered along the path. And from somewhere in that graveyard, that voice called out again, "Turn me over! Turn when he got into the door, he told his wife Mary and his kids Jim and Jeannie what he had heard in the graveyard. "Dear," she said, "there's nothing in the graveyard." "Dad," they said, "there's like nothing in the graveyard, okay?" Well, the next night was Halloween, and John left work at the usual time, 5:30, determined to walk through that graveyard. And this time, if he heard that voice, he was not going to run. He was going to follow it and find out what it was, because he knew there was something in that graveyard. So he got to the gate of the graveyard, and just as he did, heavy clouds covered up the moon, and it got really dark. He opened that gate. He stepped inside, and the wind whistled through the trees. And the leaves skittered along the path. And that voice called out, "Turn me over! Turn me over!" John was scared, but he was determined to find out what that was. He started walking down the path, following that voice. He was going to find out where it was coming from. He walked on down the path until he came to the dead center of the graveyard. And when he did, he heard that voice. "Turn me over! Turn me over!" And it was coming out of a big marble tomb. John started walking towards that tomb. It was surrounded by a big wrought iron fence with a little gate. And he opened that gate really quick. And he started walking down the steps leading to the door of that tomb. 1, 2, 3, 4. There were 13 steps in all. And when he got to the bottom, there was a big steel door leading into that tomb. John pushed it open. And he stepped inside. And there, on the floor, in the middle of that tomb, was a very large pile of glowing, red-hot embers, coals. And on top of those burning coals was a huge grill. And sitting right in the middle of that grill, half done, was a hamburger. And it said, "Turn me over! Turn me over!" So John picked up the spatula and he flipped that hamburger over, and it said, "Thank you."